Grace, mercy, and peace be from God our Father as we meditate on the Word this morning. May this nourish us this day. Amen. Like I said, there's a little bio in there on me and kind of what I'm about, and especially my work with T2C2, kind of coming alongside churches to engage their communities in a significant way, and that's kind of what we're going to be talking about a little bit more this morning. There's a few left. I had these out in the Bible class, just a little kind of trifold about T2C2, and we kind of, our work at T2C2 is we come alongside churches to help them engage their communities, kind of developing communities, planting missions, and training leaders. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more in our message from this gospel reading this morning. Now, there are some advantages about being the guest preacher. One is I can get away with saying a lot of things that the regular pastor can't because you don't have to deal with me anymore. And I don't have to deal with you anymore. No, I'm just joking. But, so you can complain to him, but I'm back in Dallas. So, no. That's a little bit of a joke. The timing of this wasn't the best on my behalf. My daughter graduated high school this weekend. And when I agreed to do this message, the graduation had been scheduled for Memorial Day weekend. So I'm like, I'm fine. And then no, I was up late last night and entertaining guests, and I'll be at it again today. But this is, I never turn down an opportunity to share the Word of God with others. So, but in all seriousness, guest pastors can sometimes say things that are a little, I guess, maybe more controversial, whatever. An example of this. In this message this morning, in the story that we read from Luke, it's interesting how Jesus talks about the authority to stomp on snakes and scorpions. That's a very Texas way of dealing with, snakes and scorpions. You have your boots, you stomp on them, or you use a shovel or whatever. But how many of you have ever been to like Alpine, Big Bend, Fort Davis, that part of Texas? And I went there for the first time a couple months ago. I was with 3 friends, another pastor and then 2 other guys. And if you ever get a chance to go down there, it's definitely should be on your bucket list if you're a Texan or if you have been in Texas for a while. It's a beautiful part. It's just no place like it in the world. And the Davis Mountains, which is kind of the opposite going up. We were saying Alpine, going north from Alpine. It's actually the Fort Davis is the only town in Texas that's a mile up. Did you know that? We have our own mile-high, we call it a city. It's a town. But it's really pretty up there. And we were driving up to the McDonald's Observatory. That's where they have the big telescope, and really cool to see all that. And on our way up there, we drove by a Rattlesnake Museum. And we're like, we got to see the Rattlesnake Museum. What could be more exciting than a Rattlesnake Museum, in Big Bend area part of Texas. So we went in there, and they had these rattlesnakes from all over. Most of them were kind of from the Southwest, but in a few other parts of the country, and even North and South America. And we were going around. They had them in these cages like these fish tanks, and we were walking around, and then every time I walked around this one cage, or this one glass, and this one rattlesnake perked up, started rattling its tail, and got right up to the I was like. Got all bent out of shape, and I was like, what did I do, And it happened a couple of times, and I went to the lady that was kind of in charge of the museum, and I was like, man, what's wrong? I said, what's wrong with that one? And she said, sir, you must be an agitator. And my friends came to my defense and said, ma'am, you have no idea. I'm like, thanks, guys. So one of my spiritual gifts, I guess, is agitation. I don't know. But no, in all seriousness, I'm hoping, and for you that were here for my Bible class presentation, not really to agitate you. That's not my goal. But my goal is to kind of get you thinking maybe about some things in a new way. And what does it really mean to be the church? What does it mean to be sent by God? What does it mean to be a missionary? When I was a kid, maybe you had... When I was a kid growing up in the church, I didn't grow up in the Lutheran church, but that's not the point. I kind of had this idea of a missionary. We'd always pray for our missionaries. When we prayed for our missionaries, they were like in Africa and South America and all these places, that seemed exotic and foreign, and they were translating the Bible into these, and it seemed like such a far thing. And then by the time I was like in high school, and I joined a Lutheran church when I was in middle school, and then my senior year in high school, we had a DCE, a youth leader, who took us on a mission trip. We were in North Carolina, and it was awesome. It was one of the reasons I became a pastor, first a DCE, a youth worker, then a pastor, is because that mission trip was that impactful on my life. But even then, the mentality is mission work is what you do is when you go somewhere. Mission work is something you plan long time for, and you go out and do it, and then you come back, and then you kind of just get back to your normal life as a Christian. So what I think one of the things that Jesus is challenging us in this text this morning is to understand that mission work isn't going necessarily a long way. Even though he sends out this group of 36 mission teams, 72 people to each, think about it, to towns and villages that he was about to go to. I mean, they probably, like, if you imagine Waxahachie, the county here, they probably all went within like a 5-mile radius. I mean, they're walking. It's not like they're, getting a plane and going this place and that place. No, they're walking out to do this. This is a very local-minded kind of effort that he's doing here. And it's also, another thing that this text kind of brings out is this idea that sometimes we think of Jesus' followers as the 12, right? He had 12 disciples, and they became apostles. And then maybe even the Marys and a couple others, but you think of a smaller group. Well, this reminds us that there's a much bigger group of people that are following Jesus here. He's got 72 that he's training and equipping to be a part of his ministry. And in the reading that we had from Acts, where it talks about the choosing of Matthias to take over for Judas, that we understand that the disciples had a bigger group than just the 12 to pull from. And no doubt, some of the men that they considered to replace Judas were probably represented in this group of 72 that Jesus pulled from. And then another place that we see that is where the disciples, because some of Jesus' followers, some of the bigger group than the 12 of disciples, start to abandon him because they say, your teaching's too hard. It's too hard to follow you, Jesus. We can't do this. And then he turns to the 12 and says, what about you guys? And Peter says, probably one of the most profound statements of faith, probably one of my, at least my favorite is, where shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. The point of all that is to say that Jesus had a much bigger group than just 12 disciples or 12 followers. His mission team was a lot bigger than just the few, but it was a bigger group. And then he collected this bigger group, the group of 72, and right after telling them to count the cost of following me. Now, sometimes in the church, or sometimes just in life, we're told something and we're taught something, but we're never actually challenged to do it. It's all an intellectual exercise. But then what Jesus does here is so different. He tells them to count the cost of following me, and then he says, I'm going to show you what this means to count the cost of following me. I'm going to send you out and do this. So, and I think, and so as T2C2, as we were coming together, the first two churches that kind of became the network, and now we're up to 5, they're doing this. We settle on that these are the 3 things that we want to be about, is helping churches develop, connect to their communities, plant new missions, and train leaders. This is one of the texts that really spoke to us, as this is some of the stuff that Jesus is showing us how to do. So, developing communities. What does it mean to develop a community? It's simply that it's to make a community better, to make a town better. Now, is it exclusively the church's job to make the community better? No. There's other organizations that help do that. But is that part of the church's job? Should we, as followers of Jesus, care about the quality of our communities? Should we care about the equality of our community? Should we care about the level of public education or education, those types of things, opportunities in our community? Absolutely. And this is showing that Jesus is getting ready to do this little tour of all these little towns to connect people and to proclaim the kingdom is here. I'm here. But he prepares them. He sends them out. He tells them to go and do specific activities to let this community know that I am going to be there. And one of the things he does, what I think that is striking, is he says, when you enter a house, first say, peace to this house. If a person of peace is there, your peace will rest on them and will return to you. Stay there, eating and drinking whatever they give you, for the worker deserves his wages. So the point is, a big part of community development is to get to know people in your community. Who are the people of peace? Who are the people that they may not even be Christians yet, oftentimes they won't be, but that have a common desire to see the community be better. People that are going to welcome to work with you as an individual or you as a church to improve the quality of your community. And as you identify people like that, he tells them, invest in those relationships. And basically, don't be isolated. Don't make all your relationships about people you know at church or other believers, but who are other people that have shared values and that you can get to know them and get to know what they're about, and they can get to know what you're about. So that a big part of developing communities is simply to get to know people in your community, identify people who have shared values, share desires to improve the community you live in, and then working together to execute common goals to do that. And Jesus tells his disciples very specifically, and he tells them, it's not going to be easy. I'm sending you out as lambs among wolves. Don't take any extra materials with you. Everything's going to be provided for you. But he also says that as you meet these people of peace, they will be the ones to welcome you in. But he also says, don't move around from house to house. So what he's saying is, as you develop relationships with people, get to really know them. Invest in those kinds of relationships. And then I think in another interesting thing is that Jesus is always challenging people to, as we've talked about that even this morning in the story of the woman at the well, challenging us to develop relationships with people outside of what makes us comfortable, outside of our socioeconomic area, outside of our, maybe even our primary race or language group. He's always challenging us to seek relationships, people of peace that don't always look and act just like us. All right, secondly, planning missions. So he told them, like I said before, to eat and drink, enjoy the people, but he also said announce the kingdom. Why is announcing the kingdom so important? Well, because developing communities can simply become an end to itself. That we're going to do social work. When you hear the term social gospel, well, that kind of got a bad reputation because in a lot of places and even a lot of churches, social gospel simply became about doing good works without the gospel. There was no distinction between the way the church did good works and the way other organizations did. And what makes us unique and what makes us different is that we do have the gospel. We do have the good news that Jesus died for the sins of the world. We want to bless our communities because of that good news, but we don't want to shy away from proclaiming that good news when the opportunities presents itself. Now, that doesn't mean that you do it all the time and everywhere. I mean, like, for example, we have a program at Bethel where I serve where we do mentoring in public schools. Well, we got to be, somewhat sensitive to the rules and restrictions there. But that doesn't mean we can't invite them to programs at our church. It doesn't mean that we can't, if they initiate the conversation at the student. Well, the point is that, sometimes you can lead with the gospel and it almost comes off as forced or as not genuine. But don't be afraid to share the gospel either. Don't be afraid to let people know that the reason we do this is because we are compelled by the love of Christ to serve. We are compelled by the love of Christ to do that. And he also says he gave them power, this group of 72 that went out, to heal the sick and to have power over the enemy. What does that mean for us today? It means that God, when he sends us out, whether it's in our own backyard or our own neighborhood just to meet our neighbors, or it says a church to do things in the community, to get out of the walls of the church, he gives us power and he gives us the authority, but he also gives us the ability excuse me, to meet tangible needs in people's lives. In this context, it was power over evil, and it was to heal the sick. But it could be something else. It could be teaching English classes. It could be providing food. It could be a variety of different tangible needs that are met. But the point is that that is part of developing communities, part of planting new missions, but ultimately the new mission is that new people are being connected to the gospel, that new word and sacrament ministries are coming out of these efforts. It's not just simply social work. And then finally, training leaders. As we've developed this mission network, we realize that a lot of the work we do is in groups that their primary language is not English, and their primary countries their country of origin is not the United States. We do a lot, obviously, in Dallas. It makes sense that a lot of our work would be in Hispanic context. But there's other groups too. We have a group of refugees from Rwanda and in Congo that are starting to gather around Bethel. And one of the things we realized that as in the Lutheran Church, there's not a lot of pastors and DCEs and youth workers and deaconesses, those kinds of things that come from those other backgrounds and speak those other languages. So one of the things we've realized is that if we're going to be engaging these communities in an impactful way, we've got to have leaders that can speak those languages, that can understand those cultural realities. So we've made a priority to raise up local leaders. Well, that's exactly what Jesus is doing here. He's not going and recruiting guys that are already priests, that are already Levites, that are already Pharisees or whatever. He's raising up fishermen and tax collectors and all these other guys and teaching them how to be leaders of this movement. And he's given them really tangible experience in doing this. He's sending them out. He's putting them out there to do it. He's showing them what to do. So it's interesting what he says here. He says, the harvest was plentiful, but the workers are many? No, he says the workers are. Jesus says this many times. This is just one of several examples of him saying this. Now, Jesus has this almost annoying habit of asking us to do hard things. Have you ever noticed that? And we as Christians, especially in America, want to follow Jesus as long as it's what? Easy and convenient. And yet, what does Jesus constantly do? Like he said in this text right before it, count the cost. This is going to be hard. And I'm going to ask you to do it anyways. Raising up local leaders. It would have been a lot easier for Jesus just to go grab some guys that had already been through the temple school and had already been trained as priests and Pharisees, all that kind of stuff, and then just try to make them do things his ways. And he realized early on in his ministry, he knew that they weren't. They never were going to get it. So sometimes you got to, in a company, right? Sometimes is it easier to raise up local people from within, or is it easier to bring them from the outside? Initially, it's easier to bring people from the outside that already have the skills you want. Long term, it's usually better to raise up people from within who understand your culture, understand your way of doing things and things like that. So that's what we're about in our mission network, but we see that that's what Jesus was about, is identifying local leaders, raising them up, and turning over the ministries to them. And praying to the Lord of the harvest, even though we know that there's always going to be more work to be done. And then what we learned about in our children's message this morning, there's always going to be more harvest work to be done than there are going to be workers. Yet we are challenged to pray for the workers. And right now we've got like 15 men and women that are at various stages of training to be future workers in the church. And most of them are from a Spanish-speaking background. And then once again, he says this isn't going to be easy. I mean, and he even says there's going to be places that you're rejected. There's going to be places that you hit. And he goes, basically he says that's between them and God. If they reject you, they're rejecting me. That's, just keep going. So But then in the end here, probably my favorite part of this whole text is when they come back. And it says, the 72 returned with joy and said, Lord, even the demons submit to us in our names. I don't know if you've ever been a part of what they call a mountaintop spiritual experience, whether it's like a mission trip or a VBS or just a time where you kind of see your kids get it or whatever. But those are awesome when you really see, like, when you really connect with God and you really feel like you're kind of this spiritual high. These guys came back and they were on a spiritual high. And he said, I saw Satan fall like lightning. I gave you authority to trample snakes and scorpions, overcome the power of the enemy. That's my story. That was a snake. That was the enemy. And I was agitating the enemy. So I was doing God's work in Fort Davis. No, nothing will harm you. However, do not rejoice that the spirits submit to you. Rejoice that your names are written in heaven. It can be really easy to hear this sermon this morning and say, well, all Pastor Chris did is give me a bunch of stuff I need to do or that I should do. And if I do these things, then I'll gain more favor from God or God will love me more, all that kind of stuff. That's not what Jesus does here. He doesn't say, rejoice because you did what I asked and it worked and that more people came to know me because of you. He says, rejoice what? In what I've done for you. That your name is written in heaven. So we don't we celebrate the good things that happen, the work that gets done in the community because of his followers going out and serving. But we don't take credit for it. We don't celebrate it for our sake. We celebrate it for the sake of God. Because it's not about what we do. It's about what he's already done for us. You see, he was preparing not only these 72 men and possibly women, and to take on this message after he died and rose again and went on, he was also preparing these towns and these villages and these places to not just be there, not to just have a couple of guys come once and share this one time, but to build new churches, to build new ministries, to build new places that would impact these communities. So we celebrate the success that ministry brings us, but not for our glory, but for the glory of the one who sent us. And we don't do this in order to gain God's favor or in the hope that he may love us more. We do it because of what he's already done for us. So, practical application. What does that mean for a church in Waxahachie, Texas? What does that mean for the churches that I'm a part of in Garland and in Dallas and in Irving and in Grand Prairie? It means this: pray to the Lord of the harvest. What can you do? You can pray. You can pray that God will raise up future leaders for his church right here in Waxahachie, Texas. Right here from the ministries that you guys engage in. You can go out with a spirit of humility, realizing that ministry doesn't not only just happen in the four walls of this church or happen when we bring people here, but also happens when the church goes out into the community to serve. You can start identifying who are the people of peace in my community, on my block, the kids, parents of kids that are on my sports teams, the other places in which you interact in your community. Where can you find commonality, common desire to serve? And then invest in those relationships. Get to know people outside the church. Get to know other people that have a heart to see the community grow. And then finally, serve needs as you're able, as they're presented to you. And don't forget to announce the kingdom. Let people know that the kingdom is near and the kingdom is good news in Jesus who came to die for the sins of the world. Amen?